Hello everyone, welcome back to Out of Spec Guide, and there's so much news always going on about the EV federal tax credit updates and changes made for it. For those of us in the US buying an EV, it's been a great incentive for a while, up to $7,500 as a tax credit on an EV. And there's been a lot of misunderstandings that are sort of understandable because this law has changed, of course. It's changed in 2023. I've made videos on Out of Spec Guide about it, but I figured because it's late in the year, we have the current regime of requirements and what EVs are eligible in place now, and we know what's happening next year in 24. Now would be a great time for me to kind of summarize everything to do with the EV federal tax credit and the used EV tax credit and explain all of these things to you in a kind of organized, coherent manner all in one place. So I just want to go over basically who qualifies, what this tax credit actually does, what's changing next year, and also, crucially, the vehicles it applies to. Because there's, nominal vehicles that the tax credit sort of applies to, but there's a lot of restrictions that mean that most buyers of those vehicles probably aren't going to get that tax credit. Are you confused yet? Because I'm not yet, but hopefully I won't be because we get a lot to go over. So let's talk EV tax credit. Do you qualify? Is it something that makes sense for you? And depending on the car you're buying, are you even going to get it? So the big deal with the tax credit is eligibility. And eligibility has to be met in two ways. One, the vehicle you're buying has to be eligible, which has been very limiting for a lot of vehicles. And two, you have to be eligible. So your own individual requirements are actually pretty simple. It's income based. So you have to, one, actually have enough tax liability to realize the benefit. So it's $7,500 split into two parts, depending on basically battery components and minerals. What you need to know is some vehicles qualify for $3,750, which is half of the amount, and some vehicles qualify for the full $7,500. And to realize either of those amounts to their full extent, you have to owe that much money in taxes, and that's basically taken as taxes you no longer owe for next year. You don't have to pay. Now, if you have withholdings and you have extra money withheld and you would have gotten a tax refund, then of course this credit can go towards you getting your tax refund. But you're not getting extra money that you wouldn't owe with taxes if you didn't have an income high enough for this in the first place. So of course it's going to be sort of dependent, but roughly, if you're making less than like $40,000 a year, I don't think you're going to realize the full benefit. I don't know the exact amount, but you'd have to be making, it depends, but $60,000, $70,000 a year, or I think more, to really actually realize $7,500 of tax eligibility. Of course, it depends on what you withheld and all of your personal situation, but there's also a cap on the maximum amount you make each year. So if you're a married couple, $300,000 for your household. If you're the head of your household individually, $225,000, and if it's just you individually filing, then $150,000. That's your kind of pre-tax max income you can make. So if you make more than that, then you are not going to get this tax credit. So those are the individual requirements. And then we get into the EV requirements. And helpfully, fueleconomy.gov has a page about the EVs that this is actually eligible for. So right now, it's actually not that many because these requirements have gotten more stringent for the cars that do get it. And that's just due to the Inflation Reduction Act choosing to prioritize U.S. production, which I think is cool as an American citizen. But yeah, for better or worse, that's basically the requirement. And a lot of automakers aren't ready yet because they haven't been assembling their critical battery components and their vehicles in North America. Automakers like Hyundai are trying very hard to get plants online running, but currently none of their vehicles get the tax credit when you buy them new with cash or you finance them. The vehicles that do are ones like the Cadillac Lyriq and with GM. Then Chevy, also under GM, has the Bolt, and they list Blazer, Equinox, Silverado. None of these cars are out yet, so I'm not going to consider them, but let's consider Bolt, which is still for sale, being produced until December. Great car, great affordable car. I made a buyer's guide on this channel if you're curious, and that one. For Ford, there's the E-Transit. If you're a commercial customer and you can buy that, great. It gets half the tax credit. The F-150, both with a standard and extended range battery, gets the full tax credit. The Mustang Mach-E gets half tax credit because it doesn't meet the both battery requirements. It only meets one of them, so it gets half of the tax credit, but still, that's notable. Then you have Tesla, their entire lineup gets the whole tax credit. Then you get Rivian, their entire lineup of 2 vehicles right now gets half the tax credit. But Rivian's interesting because you might have seen this MSRP limit. The vehicles also have to be configured under a certain amount. So if it's a sedan, it's under $55,000, which frankly I think is kind of limiting, and it's unfortunate because, if you want a nicer sedan, you're kind of penalized, whereas SUVs and trucks get this big exception. Like, that's a big difference. But anyhow, 55 grand is the cap for sedans or hatchbacks like the Bolt, and if something's like an SUV class or truck, it's 80 grand. So some really nice Lightnings like a Lariat would, I believe, could go above that. So you do have to make sure the car is under that MSRP limit. And I mentioned this with Rivian because Rivian, they may nominally qualify for $3,750, but you have to be getting the standard pack with their new cool dual motor drivetrain. So the base, powertrain. Still a very capable vehicle, but the minute, like here we are, right, at $78,000, the minute we start adding paint and options or, different kind of tire options, well, we just went over 80 grand and now we're no longer eligible. So you have to get like the absolute base spec of a Rivian R1S or R1T, and of course meet the income requirement I mentioned earlier. To qualify. And, if you're making, I would just say as an individual, less than 150 and you're buying an $80,000 vehicle, again, it's your choice, but I don't know how many people this is going to apply for, is my long and short of it with these vehicles. They're nominally on here, but I think realistically the vehicles that most people are eligible for are those more base Lightnings, the Bolt, while you can still get it, and of course Tesla's entire lineup, which is fully eligible. That's awesome. In particular, Model 3, as long as it's under $55,000, which you can get a performance under. My friend Colton did that, and we made a video that I'll link that you can look at about why he bought one this year now with that situation. It's really awesome. Model 3 long range easily qualifies. Tesla Model X barely qualifies if you get the base one. The Model S does not whatsoever because of the $55,000 price cap, it being a sedan. Model Y will qualify because it's comfortably with any spec, which is nice. Then Volkswagen ID4, they're built in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and they all are eligible in the US for the full tax credit with whatever spec you get, because none of them are going to be anywhere near 80 grand. So that's great. Lyric, I kind of glossed over because they're just not shipping that many of them. I've seen like one on the road so far in person in Colorado. I'm hoping for GM's sake and for Ultium and all of, their new vehicles that more come out. But like right now, Lyric is like barely out as far as I'm concerned. They're shipping so few of them. And the Blazer will be exciting. The Equinox will be very exciting as an affordable crossover. So will the Silverado as a capable work pickup truck, a competitor to the Lightning. But none of them are really out yet. So again, realistic vehicles that I think people are getting this for are lower trimmed F-150s, Chevy Bolts, while you can still get them, the Tesla lineup, and the VW ID4. So that's kind of really it in terms of what applies for the EV tax credit. And those eligibility requirements that I mentioned, the whole rebate thing, some of this is changing next year. So the eligibility is not changing, but starting in 2024, dealers are going to be able to actually claim your tax credit and immediately give you that transfer basically as a reduction in the cost of the vehicle. So what this means is that as long you still have to be eligible, you still have to meet the income requirements, but if you make less than the income, like I mentioned earlier, that you would need to be responsible for like up to $7,500 of taxes, you can still realize that full amount as a discount on the vehicle. So as long as you don't make over the income I mentioned, but you make under and you wouldn't realize the full tax credit, well, now you can because the dealer is claiming that and the dealer is able to report that, get the tax credit and give you that money immediately as like, let's say, a down payment off of the vehicle price. This is starting in January 1st of 2024. Now, this is really cool. However, dealers have to sign up with the IRS for it. And right now, there's some industry buzz, and I got to credit Automotive News for writing about this. They have a paywall, but here they have this article basically talking about dealers being a little bit concerned about the situation because they're not sure how quickly the IRS is going to verify if the buyer is eligible and give them their money back. So dealers are a little worried about this. This is an unknown at the moment. It's theoretically possible, but of course your dealer has to be signed up with the IRS for this. So next year, I really want to be covering this closely, figuring figuring out, is this a common thing that dealers are doing? It's not a guarantee. It's just going to be possible. I think it's really exciting, and it's going to, help lower income folks get into EVs and actually realize the $7,500 amount, in a very directly appreciable, immediate way. But again, the dealer has to be willing to do it and eligible, and of course confident that they will be promptly reimbursed by the federal government. Then we have a big loophole. That qualification thing I mentioned earlier doesn't necessarily apply if you're leasing a vehicle. This is because leased vehicles are considered corporate, right? And the corporate requirements for the tax credit, or the commercial ones, are much less stringent than the consumer ones. So for brands that lease vehicles, so this does not include Rivian yet, but the brands that do lease vehicles, they get the incentive, and many of them are choosing to pass it on to the consumer. Not all of them, notably Tesla isn't. So this is one of those reasons where right now leasing a Tesla is not really a great deal. It's unfortunate that Tesla is not passing the discounts on. They're just keeping them. But lots of automakers have wisened up to the fact that there's this big loophole, and so they're giving you basically a capitalized cost reduction on your lease of $7,500, from that incentive, passing it straight on to you when you buy a vehicle from them. So lots of vehicles here qualify that wouldn't ordinarily qualify. Like I mentioned, right, it's a very small list right now for the ones that you buy. But if you lease, then you get vehicles like the BMW i4, Genesis, Hyundai products, Kia products like the EV6, the Audi Q4, and the Q8 e-tron, BMW i7, BMW iX, Lucid Air, all of these. Now, keep in mind, the price cap still applies. So it has to be under $80,000 if it's an SUV. So I'm not sure why the Lucid's on here, because the Lucid's a sedan and it's well over $55,000 in any specification you can get. That might just be them choosing to pass on the savings. Lease Hacker is a great website. I'm mentioning them here. I think they're mentioning it because Lucid has that as an incentive, but they're forking over the cash for that. That's not the federal government. For many of these lease situations, not that it matters to you as a consumer, but just so you know, like Audi or BMW or Genesis or whomever it might be is actually taking money from the government, getting that rebate, passing it on to you. It looks like Lucid, to help shift some inventory, is just kind of forking over that money themselves, which is fine. That's great. But yeah, basically, just so you know, when you lease, these incentives are floating around, most of them because, of course, the automaker is getting the money from the government, so they're happy to pass those savings on to you if it helps them move more sales and more leases. Polestar 2, another great volume EV that gets this. So do a lot of the Mercedes lineup. Again, price cap, keep that in mind. $80,000 if it's an SUV, $55,000 if it's a sedan. If it's over that, then they're not necessarily getting that incentive. They may or may not pass one on to you anyways out of their own pocket, as Lucid is, but that's up to the automaker. So do check with your leasing company or your finance company for the automaker doing it, because they can, of course, choose not to do it. They're not required or mandated to do it, and they can, like Lucid, choose to do it without actually getting money from the government. Are you confused yet? Anyhow, there's another really interesting federal tax credit on used EVs, which is very applicable for those of us shopping in the affordable end of the market. And this credit goes all the way up to $4,000 or 30% of the sales price of the vehicle. Up to $4,000. That's the maximum. There are some requirements, but they're much looser. The vehicle has to be at least 2 years old, and it has to be $25,000 or cheaper. And then it has to meet a very very unstrict minimum of battery capacity. But honestly, many cheap EVs meet this. So again, helpfully, Fuel Economy has on their website the vehicles. I'll link these lists in the description, but they have the vehicles that are eligible. So if you filter to all electric, you can see what is eligible. Now, a lot of these, realistically, you're not getting for under 25 grand yet. However, the good news is the used EV market has been cratering. Good news for buyers, meaning that many of them you actually can. So like BMW i3, you could leverage a used EV tax credit. There's plenty of those that are under 25 grand. Keep in mind, though, that's a small city car. Right now, as of me recording this and filming this, many of the cars you're getting under 25 grand are closer to compliance cars, early EVs that aren't quite as capable as a modern new one. But hey, you're spending less money. I'm hoping more kind of fast charging, road trip capable EVs are added soon. Chevy Bolts you can actually get for well under 25 grand. My girlfriend Gosha actually did this, buying a used Chevy Bolt. So she's going to get a $4,000 tax credit this year, which is great. But she's a student. She makes very little money. So I'm not sure she's going to actually realize that. But theoretically, you could if you owed up to $4,000 in taxes. Buying a used car is smart. And it's nice that there's incentives now for buying used EVs, again, for affordability. Fiat 500e, also compliance car. Ford Focus Electric, very few of those compliance car. Mustang Mach-E, you're not getting one used under 25 grand. Hyundai Ioniq, you might. There's not that many of them. They're honestly pretty sweet, but I think they're still going over. Same thing with Kona. Again, though, if you find one under 25 grand, then yeah, it's eligible. Make sure your dealer knows, though, because they do have to submit some very basic paperwork to the IRS with their taxpayer identification number and all that. Mini Cooper S, E, I think we're going to start to see those used ones get under 25 grand soon. Nissan Leaf, easily under 25 grand. However, that car ships with an obsolete charging standard. I would highly recommend price for price getting a Bolt versus a Leaf of the same year. But that's just my opinion. Anyhow, Porsche Taycan, oh, I could dream, but I don't think you're going to get to use one of those under 25 grand. Tesla's lineup, yeah, we're starting to see, I think, some really depreciated Tesla Model 3s under 25 grand, not Model Y. The Toyota RAV4 EV, I don't think there's that many of those around. They were great for the time. Volkswagen e-Golf, great compliance city car. Again, not a road tripper, but if you want a second car, if you're buying a used car, it's there. Volvo XC40 Recharge, you're not getting used under that. So anyhow, that's the used EV tax credit. And that's all the federal stuff. Hopefully this has been a good walkthrough of what's going on, what's changing in 2024, what qualifies in the first place, both for, you as an individual, and then the vehicles that qualify, and then how you buy it. If you lease, lots more stuff qualifies. Those price caps still apply. Those hard income caps do apply. I think the big news, the reason I'm making this video now is to just clear up the confusion about 2024. Assuming car dealerships play ball, and I know they're concerned, but I think a lot of them will want to play ball to be able to, offer sweet incentives on new EVs. $7,500 is a lot of potential money. Volkswagen dealers, take note. I think that this is going to be game changing for those people who are, again, making less than that money before, who wouldn't have that much tax eligibility, who now can realize that as a point of sale discount that is sweet. And you'll have the choice, I think. You'll be able to do that, or you'll be able to take it as a traditional IRS tax credit. So that's up to the dealer and you. If you still actually have that much owed in taxes and would like to see that as a credit, then you can do that too. I know, again, my friend Colton from Out of Spec Detailing with his Model 3 Performance as a small business owner actually had a lot of tax liability. So it helped him out to do that. And that's why he had no issue buying the car today instead of waiting for 24. Though if you don't make that much money, then yeah, it could absolutely make sense to wait until January 1st, 2024 to buy an EV. One more thing before I leave you today. There's the state and utility private incentives to consider. So like in Colorado, for instance, we get a $5,000 state tax credit, and then that's going to be expanded for an extra $2,500 on EVs that are under 35 grand next year. So this is like one of the best state incentives, but all states have some kind of incentive, or well, many states have some incentives. Washington, California, you can imagine more like states that are just politically more inclined with EVs give these more, but different states have different incentives. And then Xcel Energy, my local utility company, has their own income qualified incentive, which is kind of sweet. So my girlfriend actually used this to get $3,000 off her used car, or get it as a rebate from the energy company. So that was really nice. And there is, helpfully, on the Department of Energy website, a tool you can use to basically look in your state and figure out, okay, here's all the incentives. It's a little bit, it errs on the side of having more info than you'd want, but if you look through it carefully, you can look through what are state incentives that apply to everyone, and then what are the utility/private incentives. So many of these are meant to apply towards infrastructure providers or utility companies themselves, but if those of them that apply to individuals, like the EV rebate program, you can just kind of seek through and research, and it's really cool that they just link that all in one place. So I will link this as well as a resource for those of you shopping for an EV, hoping to realize some kind of incentive. Whew, a lot of info today. Hope this has all been helpful. Federal stuff is complicated. There's lots of requirements. Big surprise, it's the IRS. I'm hoping, and I know the vehicle manufacturers are hoping too, that more stuff is eligible as factories come online, as more and more critical battery components can be assembled or sourced in the US. That will, change. That's a change we're going to have to wait, I think, several years to see for a lot of vehicles. But for the vehicles that are eligible, it's exciting. For those of you who are income eligible, the news next year is great, but also don't over focus on the federal stuff. It's so reported in national media, but I can't emphasize enough that the state and the utility incentives can be powerful on their own. They're not mutually exclusive. You can stack them with the federal stuff, and they are great on their own and often less stringent and eligible for more vehicles. Like this Colorado one has none of the same requirements that the federal one does. It applies to any vehicle so long as it's under 80 grand. So that's sweet. So yeah, just, do your research. Hopefully this has helped, though, with summarizing the federal stuff and motivated you to look in those other directions, too, towards federal used EV incentives, state incentives, utility incentives, and whatnot. Anyhow, I think I've done enough blabbering on today. I don't know about you, but by chapterizing this video, hopefully doing as best of a job as I can, I've helped clear things up for you with the EV tax credit. If you still have questions, please do leave a comment on the video, and our fellow community of EV nerds and myself, of course, will be more than happy to answer your questions. Thanks so much for watching On a Spec Guide, where we give you all kinds of first-time newbie EV buyer advice and ownership experiences and updates. I've been Max, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.